my first question was to what extent you think the growth you've seen is purely down to the ticker you have, META, as opposed to what's inside of it?
I think what we're seeing is a broad-based understanding of the enormity of the metaverse as a theme. We certainly believe that this is a multi-decade transformation akin to the rise of the internet in the 80s and 90s, and then the advent and proliferation of the mobile internet in the 2000s and 2010s. Several weeks ago, general familiarity with this concept and the enormity of its value was generally low, and I think Mark Zuckerberg, among many other companies, Roblox, Unity, Facebook, have highlighted that.
Right, and I get that maybe in the future that this will be a defining characteristic of where there are gains to be made or not. I guess we just flashed 5 of your big holdings on the screen, but looking down the full list of holdings, it is amazingly similar to more broad tech stocks, to the NASDAQ 100 or the NASDAQ itself. So at this stage, is it really the title of what you're doing and the long-term aim that is delivering for you and attracting investors, and along with the ticker, as I asked, rather than actually having that many metaverse-specific investments to make?
I think you'll see that in the top 5 in particular, there are a number of differentiators. It's my understanding that we have the highest allocation of Roblox, a clear pure-play metaverse company as far as any other available. NVIDIA, the highest holding, last I checked, 9.5%. Other ETFs show similar ranking of that company, but in totality, you'll see that we're very indexed to this theme. You're not wrong to identify that many of the most metaverse-centric companies, your Epic Games, Dapper Labs, many of those in the Web3 or blockchain community, are not yet public and therefore cannot be included in this index, but we are very early in this transition. Late in the 90s, in the mid-2000s, many of the companies at the forefront of industry came from the last generation, but very quickly they were turned out. We expect similar transformation.
I know you have written extensively about this way before anybody was talking about the metaverse. I'm not sure that people necessarily understand what it is. Investors are really excited about it, but you know, we associate it with a lot of the video games, the Fortnites and the Roblox, which are doing well in that sort of virtual reality. But you have written that it is so much more, and we're decades away from realizing it. So can you just paint a picture of exactly what you have in mind and what you think is getting everyone so excited?
The simplest way to think about it is a series of persistently interconnected 3D rendered simulations. Much like the internet is composed by billions of different web pages, websites, information sources, and devices, the metaverse will be too, albeit primarily in 3D. There's a good reason why most of the innovation is coming from the gaming industry, and that's because for decades, the only devices powerful enough to render a complex 3D virtual world were gaming consoles, gaming PCs, and other intensive rendering equipment. And then, of course, the only companies that were actually producing those environments were in the gaming space. But that's why we now see that companies like NVIDIA, like Unity, that have spent decades focused on that segment, are now pioneering in many other use cases: automotive, architecture, construction, and more.
Matthew, a lot of people pointing out, and it comes also after the Iceland tourist board kind of mocking commercial last week of Facebook's name change announcement to Meta, that we're suddenly talking with great interest about this superficial world that can be created going forward after a year in which we all realized how much we missed human interaction. And I guess I just ask whether you think that things are just a little overexcited in this space at the moment.
There's definitely some overexcitement, but I think there are 2 things that we learned during the pandemic. One is that many of the experiences which from time to time must be done remote, or that many people internationally do every day remote, such as education, are wholly inadequate in a 2D environment. A multiple choice quiz gets nowhere near an in-person experience in a classroom, and therefore there's hope that moving to a virtual 3D rendered environment will enhance both the in-person experience as well as the at-distance experience of education. But more broadly, I think it's important to highlight that there are 300 million Americans every day that watch an average of 5.5 hours of television. The average senior watches 7.5 hours per day of television. That's a predominantly solitary, disengaged experience, and it is the most common form of entertainment and leisure today. For my part, I think any shift to a more social, immersive, engaged environment, irrespective of the term you use, is actually going to augment that. Iceland should be less focused on whether or not people are going to travel because of the metaverse, and more concerned about whether or not it's going to get people off the couch.